Hello, welcome. It's a pleasure to see you all here. I'm Ed Wasserman, the former dean of the Graduate School of Journalism. And welcome to our 2025 Herb Caen Lecture. We co-sponsor this annual event with San Francisco Chronicle to honor somebody who has been gone since 1997, I'm afraid, so not many of us have seen his columns while he was in his prime. His name was Herbert Eugene Caen. For nearly 60 years, he wrote a truly beloved column for the San Francisco Chronicle, and served as what the Pulitzer Board later called the voice and conscience of San Francisco. And to their credit, the people who run the graduate school and the people who run the San Francisco Chronicle decided that they did not want to lose his memory. So we do this, and to your credit, you responded and came, and this is a wonderful turnout. I have to say, it's kind of delightful. It's also, gathering in the name of one legendary journalist in the presence of two other exceptional journalists of today, feels in the current moment a bit illicit. It's kind of like huddling behind closed doors with fellow conspirators who are, so we can listen to things we're eager to hear but forbidden to say. And somebody I think is watching the door. So we're probably okay. This is indeed a moment for the press. It's an adversarial moment. It's not the first time. The press actually fluctuates in our culture between being a vehicle of resistance and a promoter of consensus. Now, in my time, Watergate was probably emblematic of the resistance mode. Nixon is so despised nowadays that it's worth remembering that in his day, he was immensely popular. He had just won re-election with 49 states. He had the largest popular vote totals, margins of any Republican candidate until then. And the journalists who defied him were widely reviled and remained reviled until his wrongdoing became self-evident, became undeniable. So that was a moment of resistance for the press. There are other times the press embraces the cause of consensus and national unity. Think 9/11, with the media proudly marching in lockstep to wide acclaim toward the criminal folly of the Iraq War. So paradoxically, it's the moments of adversarialism that turn out to be the ones we honor. And it's vital to remember that and at a time when we want to remind ourselves how indispensable real journalism is, especially in this moment of unparalleled threats to media organizations, their viability, to the protections reporters rely on to do what they must do, and to the flow of information to the public domain. And most disturbingly, at a moment when we can't be sure anybody's listening. But as the playwright put it, attention must be paid. And that's the journalist's job. Without them, we wouldn't know about the young man, an entirely legal U.S. resident who committed no crime when he was taken from his home in the dead of night to a lockup 1,000 miles away, leaving his pregnant wife in terror. We wouldn't know how the cuts are affecting the most vulnerable people on the planet and depriving them of antiviral medication, vaccines, treatment for tuberculosis and malaria or Ebola. We'd have no light on the political, economic, cultural, social upheavals around us, including those that are coming to us at UC Berkeley, thanks to the spreading wish to police the way that thought and social problems are being framed. So tonight we're lucky to have with us, we wouldn't have that light, but tonight we're lucky to have with us two journalists who devoted their careers to providing that illumination. Our interlocutor will be Joe Garofoli, the San Francisco Chronicle's esteemed senior political writer. Joe has worked at the Chronicle since 2000 and in Bay Area journalism since 1992. He's covered everything from fashion to the Jeffrey Dahmer serial killings to two Olympic Games to his own vasectomy. That's what it says here. Joe won the Polk Award for military reporting and won a Webby Award in 2021 for Best Documentary Podcast for a film called Who is Kamala Harris. He's a graduate of Northwestern, a native of Pittsburgh. Joe will be talking with our special guest, Jennifer Rubin, who Jennifer, for 14 years, was one of the Washington Post's leading opinion columnists. She got her undergraduate and law degrees here at Berkeley, so welcome home, Jennifer. And practiced labor law in Los Angeles for 2 decades before entering journalism. There she made a name for herself as a fiercely independent, center-right voice on the Post's op-ed pages. She was a little lonely there. She also became an MSNBC contributor, and a frequent guest on radio shows. In January, after the Post's owner, Amazon chieftain Jeff Bezos, you may recall, killed its endorsement of Kamala Harris for president, and her boss rejected a cartoon in which tech bigwigs, including Bezos, kneeled before President Trump, Jennifer quit the Post and went the entrepreneurial route. She joined the eminent ethicist Norm Eisen to launch The Contrarian, a platform that covers politics, policy, and culture. It already has several 100,000 subscribers, so despite her best efforts, she finds herself with a very loyal liberal following. The Contrarian has featured writing and interviews with everyone from Paul Krugman and Charlotte Eiffel to Lawrence Tribe and Olivia Juliana. It's committed to the idea that humor and culture are critical to a democracy and features political cartoons, satire, cooking, and more. So you should check it out. Now I have one more thing to say to you all before I turn you over to Jennifer and Joe. I want to call your attention to the card that's on your seat. It was on your seat. I know you're already giving generously to the media. You subscribe, you give money to public radio. I get it. You've already fully out there and committed. But supporting journalism isn't the same as supporting journalism education. Sad fact. Once, in my day, America's news organizations trained their staffs. No longer. The skills journalism demands are tougher than ever to learn, but the industry can no longer afford to teach. And that's what we do at Berkeley Journalism's intensive 2-year program in Master in Journalism. We need your help. You can truly make a difference by pointing your phone at the QR code on that card, making a donation right now or in a few minutes. That's fine too. Our students thank you and will show their appreciation to you by continuing to turn out the kind of tough-minded journalism that you rely on and that our guests tonight will remind you of. So we thank you in advance, and I welcome Joe Garofoli and Jennifer Rubin.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to this illicit evening. My goodness,
Yes.
It's really taking a turn. Jen, this was a hot ticket. This was sold out within hours. It's like a Taylor Swift show.
I am overwhelmed.
Congrats.
And earlier this week, I was at another event in San Francisco and ran into Erwin Chemerinsky, who is as most of you know, the dean, courageous individual. And I needled him just a little bit. And I said, the School of Journalism is honoring me. You guys haven't done anything yet. So he took it in the spirit of which it was offered. And
you were first in your class.
I was. And I practiced labor law for about 20 years. I loved every minute of being at Berkeley. And coming back is always so heartwarming, and I have such great memories. And sometimes people ask why I write the way I do, or where my criticisms of other journalists come from. And I have to say, almost everything I learned here in some way or another comes up in journalism. And by that I mean it's just an intellectual feast here. You can learn about anything. You can talk to anybody. You can find stuff out. And that's really all journalism is. Mm-hmm. And so coming back here, it kind of touches my heart. The place looks pretty good, some new buildings. But otherwise, it's
People's Park doesn't look the same.
Yes, yes.
Well, I know many of the people in our audience tonight. Oh, first of all, we're going to talk. Jen and I are going to talk for about 40 minutes, and then the last 20 minutes are going to be your questions. So I know we have a lot of students here and a lot of very smart, informed people, and so prepare questions that are better than the ones that I'm going to ask. So many of the people here tonight, and especially here in the Bay Area and California, spent the last few weeks freaked out by what's coming out of Washington, and have trouble sifting out to be what to be most freaked out about. What should we be most freaked out about?
Oh, wow. You know, people have separated two things that I think should be talked about together. One is the accumulation of great wealth and great power in a few billionaires, frankly. And the prospect that they have bought a president, are running the government, it has become of, by, and for the billionaires. And that is of grave concern to us all. The other side of the same coin is the destruction of democracy. And the two invariably go hand in hand because oligarchy isn't popular, almost by definition, because all the toys are theirs. And their mission is to collect even more toys. And so if you disable democracy, you disable accountability, you disable the ability to get them out of office, then they can get more of the toys. And so I think we are seeing this fusion of a hyper-nationalistic, hyper rich, and very authoritarian kind of ethos. And it hits you in the head every single day. I don't know if you guys saw the news today, but the president went to the Department of Justice in that august building named after Robert F. Kennedy, where, yes, justice is supposed to be done. He gave, and I don't even like to use the language, he didn't give a speech. He came to rant. And one of the things he did was single out Norm Eisen, who is now under 24-hour protection and has been for a while, since he is one of the principal litigators against Trump.
And your
and my
partner.
co-founder. And he also declared that MSNBC and CNN should be illegal. And what he meant by that, it was very interesting. He never hides very well what he means. He said 97% of what they write is negative. That should be illegal. Now, if that's not the voice of a totalitarian, I don't know what is. That is fascism. That is squashing accountability, squashing a free press, squashing any negative thoughts, any negative sentence.
Towards him, yeah.
Towards him, exactly.
Joe Biden tried to warn us of this in his aborted campaign about the threats to democracy, Trump being a threat to democracy. Voters weren't engaging in that message. It's come to pass. Where do you think Trump is most threatening to democracy?
Oh, it all is of a piece. He has been on this tear to assume the power of the purse from Congress. And none of us, I think, realized, aside from the Bill of Rights, how vitally important the structure of our Constitution really is. Because so long as you have the power of the purse in the legislature, and particularly with the House of Representatives, which has to stand for election every 2 years, is closest to the people, that there is a check on a all-powerful executive who leads the executive branch. And after all, that's why we had the revolution. We did not want the king. And there's a reason why the Congress is Article 1. It's supposed to be the most important. The powers the founders believed were robust, and frankly, they didn't think the executive was going to do all that much. It was going to see that the laws were upheld and instrumentally put into practice. But what they are doing by going into agencies and ripping out or closing them down, firing half the staff, shutting programs down in day or any other kind of time frame, is it's not only the cruelty, it's not only the stupidity, it's not only the self-interest of a guy who has millions and millions of dollars in contracts with the federal government. It is a direct challenge to Congress that he's going to decide how much we spend on what. And unfortunately, given the vote today, that's going to be a little bit easier for him to do because the continuing resolution allows greater flexibility in moving money around. So rather than stand their ground on this central constitutional principle, it's not just a matter of saving the education department, saving USAID, saving the other agencies that he's decimated. This is the fight. This is the structural point at which you have to challenge him and you have to defeat him. So
is this the point where the Dean Wasserman mentioned the Nixon era? Didn't Nixon? Trump is sort of harkening back to Nixon's playbook with impoundment.
Exactly. We had this fight once before.
Explain what that is. And Nixon lost that.
Nixon lost.
And it's
Nixon
the exact same
decided he
playbook.
wasn't going to spend the money that Congress allocated. And they took him to court and they won. And as a result of that, we got what is sometimes ridiculed, but frankly has kept us in fairly good stead, which is the Budget Act, which sets forth a very laborious process for budgeting and then appropriations, and that includes all the weird rules and exceptions on reconciliation and all the rest of it. But what that said, and to Richard Nixon, who wasn't big on accepting the constitutional system that he was supposed to implement, was that, no, you don't get to decide. There's a law. A law that appropriates money is just as valid as a law that says you shall not, murder someone, or you shouldn't have insider trading, or any of the other federal laws. It's a law. It's binding. And yet he has decided to take it upon himself. Now, I don't want to suggest that that's the only thing that we're worried about. Not only because I'm a journalist, but because I revere the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment. I subscribe to Jefferson's formulation that if you have a choice between government and a free press, which would you choose? A free press. And it is the systematic eradication of dissent, criticism, whether it's targeting media outlets, whether it's saying to a person on a green card, because you participated in a protest that we don't like, we're kicking you out. It has to do with literally going through the federal code and taking words out, anything that smacks of DEI. And by the way, it's absurd because they have words and phrases like, equal, or, all kinds of phrases that have other meanings it's preposterous, aside from the fact that, of course, it's ridiculous not to collect certain information or not to have certain studies. So it is censorship writ large. And then on top of that, he is now, of course, harassing the legal profession. And we don't have to have great sympathy for big Washington law firms. But in this case, we should watch very carefully. He already has corrupted the Justice Department, who thinks they are the president's lawyers. No, they're our lawyers. They take an oath to the Constitution. But now he's going to decide who everybody else gets to have as a lawyer. And so he has gone after these two firms. The second one was so severe that it went so far as to ban them from federal buildings, ban them
And this
from
firm
contracts.
did work for Hillary Clinton. This is
Yes.
why he's
So
he's
you
calling
can't
them
do
out.
that, right?
Yeah.
And ban the people, their clients. So this is a death sentence for a law firm. And I keep repeating to people who are equivocating sometimes on the merits, if they can tell a firm as large as that they can't do business, how do you think a small practitioner, how do you think the criminal defense bar is going to do? How do you think the plaintiff's bar is going to operate? This is tyranny. And I think we have to call it what it is. I think we have to make sure that we don't exhaust ourselves and allow it because it's all too much to keep up with. Right. And I will say this, aside from, in some cases, some very good journalism, the federal bench at the district court level has issued some doozies of opinions. And every week I pick out an undaunted character. And this week I chose Judge Howell from the DC Circuit, who has written these magnificent opinions. And it's not simply because it's a technical description of what went on, but she talks about democracy. She talks about the First Amendment. She talks about the obligation of lawyers to represent unpopular clients. So if we read a tenth of what she writes, if the press is able to convey a small percentage of what some of these judges are doing, that will be helpful. But of course, it's not enough.
And we're here in Berkeley, in the heart of the East Bay. We don't want to just kvetch about something. We want to do something. In fact, when we were coming here today, we passed a demonstration in the street. What can people in this room and who are watching do to push back against the administration? You worked in Washington for many years. You used to be tight with conservatives in government. What moves them that people at home can do?
Right. Losing their job. That is the only thing. Many of these people will never get a job nearly as impressive as what they have. Can you imagine Marjorie Taylor Greene trying to get a job in the private sector? Can you imagine some of these senators who are not all there trying to get a law firm to hire them as a partner? It's inconceivable. And as a result, they will do anything to stay where they are. And what they perceive on the Republican side is they shall not cross Donald Trump because, number one, he's dangerous and they're afraid of him. They're physically afraid of him. And they fear a primary from someone who's
funded by Elon.
Right. And that is what is driving the passivity, the cowardness, and that's a central problem. So what do we all do about it? Well, for one thing, we really do support journalism, and that's good journalism. And whether it's traditional media, whether it's new independent media that I'm finding fascinating and exhilarating, you have to be able to hold these people accountable. So pick out Substacks you like. I hope you pick ours, but pick out some Substacks. People need to help local regional papers. As you know, they've died out. And there are many state capitals that don't have a newspaper anymore, which is almost an impossibility. How do you learn what's going on? How do you find out about scandals, corruption, all the ins and outs of government, let alone the fact that because papers have gotten consolidated into massive chains, they don't think it's in their interest to cover school boards, to cover the town council, to cover all of these things that are vitally important to democracy. So supporting media is one. Secondly, we think they don't listen, but they really do. And they count calls and they track calls. And it does matter. And it matters both ways. If your senator or your congressperson has taken a tough vote, you want to call them then too, because they are getting grief from the other side. So it's calling support, it's being specific on what you like and what you don't like. Next thing you have to do, and it's happening. We are reinvigorating the notion of a town hall. I mean, I always think of that Rockwell painting. The guy is standing up at, New England Town Hall. That's like the essence of American democracy. Why is that so important? First of all, they think it's important. They're hiding. The Republicans are literally not going out in public, which, when you think about it, is kind of bizarre, that their job is to represent these people and they're afraid to face them. But Democrats, I would hope, not only go to Republican districts to set up shop, but that they
Ro Khanna is doing that in the next couple of weeks.
Right.
He's going to conservative or Republican-held districts in Southern California.
Exactly. So he's doing a great job. But that they also engage with their own citizens. We've come to think that democracy is like a spectator sport. You keep score, you watch the plays. It's not. It's not like watching a football or a basketball game. It's participatory. That means all of us. And if you didn't believe it this week and today, if we count on a handful of politicians to rescue us from Donald Trump, we will be sadly disappointed, and we will be on the road to autocracy. Every movement in America, the labor movement, the women's movement, the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, started as a grassroots movement. Right. It is collective action and directed, specific collective action that has to be the essence of our activity. So that does mean going to protests. That does mean going to town halls. And beyond that, it means engaging in elections that may not be in your backyard. One of the upsides of the internet and all the rest of it is you can help phone bank in New Jersey or Virginia, which has elections this year, not only for governor, but for all their state legislators. You can help in the Wisconsin State Supreme Court race, which is April 1st, and Elon Musk has put $10 million into this race. Why does he want to do this? He wants to buy a state Supreme Court. They've been so successful buying a federal Supreme Court, why not buy up the state ones too? So this is what you're up against, and it requires effort. It requires that you don't just doom scroll. It requires that you do something. There are also innumerable groups that are fighting the good fight. The ACLU is
you're on the Contrarian, you highlight them.
We do, and we highlight the protests, the
yeah.
demonstrations, because people feel isolated, but it is also, whether it's Protect Democracy, the NAACP, ACLU, these groups are trying to hold themselves together, which, glue and chewing gum. So they need help. They need support too. And I think the other thing is people forget it matters who's on your school board. It matters who's on the city council. We have to get good and decent and responsible people to run at the local level. What we found out was overnight, oh, look, these right-wing mothers groups have captured school boards all over the country. Oh, maybe that's why they're banning books in the schools. You have to be able to go up and down the ballot and to fill those spots. There were a group of 5 or 6 women, who on the night that Hillary Clinton lost, like all of us, were gobsmacked. And they began chatting with one another. And soon they had 3,000 women, the progressive women of Chesterfield County, which is a kind of a mixed district, very rural in some places. They also pick up a little bit of Richmond. And now they are filling those ballots all the way down to the city clerk, which in a lot of states is on the ballot. And these women say, I'll be honest, I didn't even know who my state representative was. And many people don't. So getting people to run for office, and now people want their endorsement. They come to the progressive women of Chesterfield County to get a stamp of approval, and they're going to have to be specific on what they want to do. They have to be specific on what their policies are. So it really is the full panoply, whether it's running yourself, volunteering on campaigns, giving money, contacting your representatives. There is something that you can do every day. And it's not doom scrolling. It is not depressing yourself. That doesn't count as doing something. It really doesn't.
I want to look back onto the
Yeah.
fear of Trump and
Yes.
by other fellow Americans or fellow Republicans. I was blown away. Well, we all saw the disastrous Oval Office meeting with Zelensky and Trump and Vance. But I think it was hours after that and many Californians and other sentient beings will remember when Southern California, particularly Orange County, was the epicenter of anti-communist Republicans. But right after that meeting, Darrell Issa, who's a congressman from Southern California, nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. But the silence was deafening from Republicans. No Republicans said that. When did Republicans lose their fear and loathing of Russia, Russia, Russia?
When Donald Trump got to be president.
Yeah.
And
if they're not going to push back on him on that,
Right.
where's the line? When
Right, there is
will
no
they?
line.
There
There is no line. We have
There's
to
no, not even Fifth Avenue shooting.
we have to get over the notion that there'll be some event that will finally wake them up. They know exactly what he is, and they either like it or they don't care because all they want to do is stay in office. And I have to say, of all the atrocious things he has done, I don't think I have ever been as disgusted, as embarrassed, as ashamed as an American as watching him in the Oval Office beat up a Democratic ally who is fighting for their survival. This is not a war we are in. We're giving them money and weapons. Beat him up, repeat Russian propaganda to his face, trying to embarrass and humiliate him in front of the world. I think that was a low in American history. I'm sure there have been other lows, but that was a low. And not only to see such a bully, but to see America on the side of evil. It would be like during World War II, FDR saying, not only are we going to cut off Lend-Lease, but these German guys aren't so bad. I think they might win. We're going to kiss up to them.
Yeah.
It's of that magnitude. We are on the side of evil, of aggression, of fascism.
Now,
And
you wrote in Trump's first term, his cabinet was composed of, as you say, ignoramuses, billionaires, and a few generals. How would you describe the composition of this cabinet? And who's the John Kelly in this room
there is none.
who provides some semblance
Right,
of a guard?
there isn't. And
nobody?
And that's what many of us wrote about and warned about, that Trump 2.0 was going to be much worse than Trump 1.0. First of all, in Trump 1.0, he really didn't understand what he could do. So if someone said, no, you can't back out of the Iran nuclear deal, he kind of said, okay, and played that on for a while. He didn't know, like a child who gets superpowers, didn't know his own strength, didn't know what he could do. And because he was still concerned about wooing the Republican Party and impressing the public, he got some people who were at least sane. We might have thought their views were abhorrent, but they were sane, they were intelligent people, they understood some basics of government. There is no one there. There is no one going to speak up. Look at Marco Rubio, who looked like that Homer Simpson meme where he backs into the hedge. He wanted to disappear into that couch. This is a guy whose entire public life has been devoted to fighting authoritarianism in Cuba. He traveled the world with John McCain, among other people, in the cause of freedom, in the cause of democracy, and now he is implementing this noxious betrayal of American values and democracy. There is no one. And again, I think it's still so inconceivable to us that there wouldn't be someone there, or that he can't be stopped, that we imagine, well, there's just one more thing, or we glob on to one person who seems less insane than the rest of them. There aren't any. There aren't any. When you have Kash Patel at the FBI, Pam Bondi at the Justice Department, I mean, Lee Zeldin at EPA, these are all people who either have no idea about anything or they are fundamentally antagonistic towards the agency that they have been assigned to.
Well, let's talk about Democrats. And since this is we're at the School of Journalism, I think there's a very apt headline today in The Onion that says, Schumer helps pull Dems back from brink of courage.
Exactly.
So earlier this month, I interviewed Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries when he was pushing his book here in Oakland. And I asked him what his response was to the hundreds of people outside who were literally chanting, grow a pair.
Yeah.
His response was, well, we're in the minority, but stay tuned. I've been tuning in, and I haven't seen a lot of metaphorical growth in his Democratic loins. What more could Democrats be doing that they're not?
Well, in fairness to Hakeem Jeffries and to Nancy Pelosi and to really the entire Democratic leadership and to Nancy Pelosi, up until the time of the vote and beyond the time of the vote, they were railing at the Senate Democrats. That's not something you normally see. You really don't.
Pelosi she never shoots inside the house.
And particularly for someone like Nancy Pelosi, who goes back decades with Chuck Schumer, for them to bash these people and for them to give not a single vote to the continuing resolution. Remember, you have to praise as well as discipline and condemn. They are worthy of support and praise. And we shouldn't forget, just because a group in the Senate betrayed them, that it took us to do that too, because they would have been responsible for a shutdown and they would have had to explain themselves. By the way, what's wrong with explaining to the American people why you had to shut down the government to save the Constitution? They're incapable now of persuasion, of communication, so they just don't want to rock the boat. I always thought that politicians were supposed to be aggressive and like the arena and like the conflict. They didn't get the memo in the Senate. And it's a very interesting split of who voted in what camp. First of all, with the exception of Dick Durbin, who I firmly believe will not run for re-election in 2026, no one on the ballot in 2026 voted for this thing. There's a reason. Everybody knows that this is the kiss of death. So Chuck Schumer actually said something to the effect like, oh, I'm not up for 4 years. That's a long time. People will forget. So
not AOC.
Not AOC. And you may be looking at the next senator from New York. Actually, they have a problem with both their senators because Kirsten Gillibrand voted for this thing as well. So what I think happened here is what often happens with Washington politicians, and that is they get cut off from reality. They live in their bubble. The Senate thinks they're above all of its debating society. The good gentleman from, Tennessee who just voted to, imprison women for having abortions. My good friend from the state of Texas who is now helping to eviscerate aid to Ukraine. It's this phony kind of civility. It is a separation from people. It is a separation from the ordinary lives. We talk about billionaires in the administration. Have you looked at the wallets of people in the Senate? These are by and large very rich people. They don't go to the grocery store. They don't depend on Medicaid. They've never stepped foot in a public hospital in rural America. They are out of touch, and they are surrounded by sycophants who tell them what they want to hear. Oh, yes, Senator, you're right, you're right, you're right. No one will speak up to them. And when the House does, they invoke this incredible snobbery that the Senate has. There's a saying that in frankly, both the House and the Senate, that the enemy is not the Republicans, it's the Democrats in the other body, or the same for the Republicans. So it is not only a syndrome of Republicans, but of Democrats as well. And that's why you have to rattle the cage. That's why you have to let them know it is unacceptable. And we'll see how much money Kirsten Gillibrand raises in 2026. She's in charge of the Senate fundraising for the Democrats. I think she's going to have a little problem. I think she's going to have difficulty. She's better not come to the Bay Area. I will advise her. And she might want to stay out of New York City, too. But they do not see any consequence to them playing along to get along. And that's why you have this ridiculous conviviality, cordial interchange between Lindsey Graham and Dick Durbin. I have written more columns excoriating Dick Durbin for being a mush and for being a pushover than probably any other single Democrat. I am sure that when his aide comes in and says, Jennifer has another column, it is not a good day in the Durbin.
Speaking of your column, I want to leap ahead because we're running short on time before we get to the audience questions, about your post departure. After Bezos killed the endorsement of Kamala Harris, between there and election day, 300,000 subscribers dropped their subscription. And for a good numbers comparison, how many subscribers do you have now?
We are closing in on 550,000.
To a Substack. That's crazy. I want to ask you to sort of walk us through the moment when you learned of the cancellation of spiking the post endorsement of Harris. But I also wanted to ask you about something that Marty Baron, the Post former executive editor, a guy. This for context, if you saw the movie Spotlight, he was played by Liev Schreiber. Okay.
And he looks like Liev Schreiber. He really does.
You're generous. Yes.
Yeah.
And hope he's not watching. So he said that Bezos is scared of Trump. Is that your impression? And what was your impression? We saw Bezos and Oligarch Row at the Trump inauguration. But what's your impression of Bezos? Is he scared of Trump?
This is called obedience in advance. If any of you are familiar with Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny, fabulous, the first rule is do not obey in advance. Do not give them freebies. Do not capitulate before there's even an ask or even a penalty. And that is what these people did. For him and for, I suppose, large conglomerates like Comcast, the journalism business is a sidelight. It's at worst an inconvenience, and at best it can be used as their government affairs department to butter up the people that are going to give them contracts. And so he doesn't care if they lose 300,000 subscribers because he's got bigger fish to fry. He has the Amazon cloud business, which is billions of dollars, and he has Blue Origin, which is billions of dollars. So if he destroys an American institution like the Washington Post, how do you compare, really? It's, you have to make choices in life, right? So what he has done is he has literally turned it into the PR/government affairs department of the campaign to get more dollars out of the federal government. By the way, have you noticed this incredible hypocrisy of people who said, I've done it all myself, and they are indebted by billions and billions of dollars? Imagine Tesla without government tax credits.
38 billion Tesla.
Yeah. So I think the bottom line is that they really don't care, and he's willing to throw it all away. And he doesn't even have the good graces to give it away and let someone else run it. Because right now, it's providing a service to him. It's sucking up to Trump. And Trump likes that. You think he would have been on that dais if he had endorsed Kamala Harris? No, he'd be under investigation by one of the corrupt departments that he now runs. So yes, they are afraid, and they are driven by greed and a quest for relevance and proximity, to watch these people grovel going down to Mar-a-Lago. Really, I mean, how they sleep at night, they're wired differently than many of us, is all I can say. And so, yes, they're afraid of him. And they see, in some ways, that he's an easy mark. He's always been an easy mark. He's an easy mark for the Russians. He's an easy mark for other politicians. All you have to do is suck up to him. All you have to do is flatter him and get him to do just about anything.
I want to talk. We have one time for one more question, then we'll go to audience questions. I want to talk about free speech on campus, here in the home of the free speech movement.
Yes.
This month, President Trump threatened to cut federal funding for campuses that engage in anti-Semitism, including the one closest to us here at UC Berkeley. Justice Department has opened an investigation to, quote, assess whether the UC and about a dozen other universities, including my alma mater, has engaged in a pattern or practice of discrimination based on race, religion, and national origin against its professors, staff, and other employees by allowing an anti-Semitic, hostile work environment to exist on its campuses. Now, after the October 7th attack by Hamas, many university students around the country stood with Palestinian supporters in support of massive anti-Israel demonstrations and protest encampments on campuses, including a few blocks away from here. What is Trump doing here, and what concerns do you have about what effect it might have on free speech on campus? Because they're threatening, Berkeley receives millions of dollars in federal funding.
Again,
what are your
right out of
concerns?
the authoritarian playbook. They crush academic institutions because they are hotbeds of learning and hotbeds of criticism and hotbeds of progress.
So what should the line be on free speech? What should you be allowed to say and do and
Well,
not?
first of all, the campuses themselves have to decide what they want to be when they grow up. They have to decide whether they are truly going to be a place for political and free speech, and then they have to extend it to everyone. Or if they're too afraid and it's all too messy, then they have to apply that rule to themselves. And oh, by the way, if you're a state school, it may not be so easy to shut people up because they do have First Amendment rights. So, first of all, anytime you see Donald Trump telling a school, whether it's an elementary school, that they can't practice DEI, however they define that. And by the way, that's the exact same issue because they throw these terms around. They don't have specific meaning. And so all they do then is intimidate and chill. That's the game. Intimidate and chill. And they think that people are going to capitulate. They think people are going to be intimidated. And of course, the other half of that is that they are threatening now to pull green cards and visas from students. So it is all the heavy hand of an authoritarian thug. And you have to be able to resist. You have to be able to resist in the courts, and you have to be able to resist in the court of public opinion. And if we let them take over institution after institution, the press, academia, science, then we're going to be lost. And that is what they do. They cannot tolerate an independent voice of reason, of information, of criticism. And we have to jealously, jealously guard that.
All right, well, let's go to audience questions. But first, I want to read one from our online audience. And someone writes in, how concerned should we be when corporate owners of news organizations, Disney and Paramount, settle meritless lawsuits? And I think this questioner might be referring to the ABC settlement.
This made it into my resignation letter because it is one of the worst capitulations of a media outlet. Jeff Bezos gave $1 million to the inauguration fund. Can you imagine Kay Graham giving $1 million to Richard Nixon or to LBJ? It's humorous, but it's obscene. He's the press. He's giving money to the guy he's covering? What is this? And in some ways, it's even worse when they agree to a ridiculous settlement for a frivolous case, because this endangers all the other media outlets. By saying that George Stephanopoulos, that kind of a slip of the tongue and a slight paraphrase of what the judge said in the E. Jean Carroll case, is a $15 million lawsuit, puts every other media organization in the sights of Donald Trump. And it will chill not only ABC, but everybody else. And even worse, because it's even more frivolous, is the pressure being applied to Paramount, which now has an interest in Sherry Redstone getting her money out and their financial gains, in forcing a settlement of 60 minutes on a false allegation that somehow they edited the Kamala Harris interview. Frank, now you will note that the right to edit is part and
Still
parcel.
got that one.
Yeah, is part and parcel of the First Amendment. So put that aside for a moment. But it's utterly frivolous. And they've already begun to capitulate. They already gave up the videotape of the uncut version. They have no sense of responsibility because money is involved, and they are willing to sell their folks down the drain. Now, you know how we learned about that case is, I'm sure, all the 60 Minutes people went to their friends at the New York Times and they set up the flare because they're hoping to embarrass them enough that they won't do this. Will it work? I don't know. But these are not settlements. Settlements are good faith agreements to settle real disputes. These are disguised bribes. And it is absolute bribery. And by the way, corruption is one of the other telltale signs. And it's not just the guys who are in power. They're not going to enforce the Foreign Registration Act. So we have foreigners, Chinese, Russians manipulating our press, manipulating the public without identifying themselves. And they have stopped enforcing the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So that now companies around the world are expected to pay up, because in the past, if you were Mobil Oil or you were Xerox or you were Apple and so on, you could say, I wish I could give you the bribe, Mr. Prime Minister, but I can't because there's a law back home. Well, now there isn't. And so this is not a good thing for business. This is not a good thing for democracy. But corruption is always front and center. And whether it's themselves or whether it's other people, it's endemic to who they are.
So if you have a question, put up your hand, and our mobile microphone will come around to you. For Jennifer.
I have a question about Substack. I'm a first-day subscriber to Contrarian. I love it. Thank you very much. I guess my question is about the viability both for subscribers as well as its reach. I mean, is it just reaching people like us that are in our bubble? Does it have an opportunity to reach where local newspapers no longer can reach?
I mean, there are lots of challenges in the current media environment. And we are clearly entering an inflection point where something or some things are changing. We need good reporting and we need facts. And there are still large media outlets that do that. And you're exactly right. You need the basic facts. It can't simply be recycled commentary and recycled opinion. But the mainstream platforms are doing less and less, and they're less and less of the credible mainstream platforms. So what do we do? Well, there's ProPublica. And by the way, if you want to make a donation, put yourself on a monthly donation to ProPublica. These people have broken more stories, including the Supreme Court. They have changed the way we report on the Supreme Court, which used to be a reverent attitude and as if they were on high and beyond reproach. And now it's a beat. You have to cover it because corruption is there too. Bias is there too. So there are not only ProPublica, but other public-oriented nonprofit ventures that do this. And the other venture is the great experiment of independent journalism. The danger that we all recognize every day is the audience fragmentation that began when the internet caught on and is becoming even more so. there are ways to counteract that. And it's a really interesting environment in kind of the Substack world. In traditional media, everybody else is a competitor. You're competing for the scoop, you're competing for the access. Here, at least in the pro-democracy space, and there really is a pro-democracy space, it's about helping everybody to boost audience. So Heather Cox Richardson comes on for an interview. She is the largest Substack. She has over 1 million subscribers. Well, we got a bunch of them after that, and hopefully I'm sure they already subscribed to her, but maybe got a few from us as well. So a spirit of collaboration and reinforcement and referencing. So you create.
Can you make that work, though, if you're not a Jen Rubin, if you're not a Heather Cox Richardson?
Well, there are lots of people who are not Jen Rubin, but they're very big.
I have several friends who have Substacks and like that.
Are prominent
Sorry,
people.
not subscribing.
But so it is a meritocracy. If what you write is interesting, is provocative, is real, people will come find you. And that's how we have found really hidden talents of these people. Like, how did you find this guy? Well, I went on social media. He was really smart, and that's how I picked it up. So people who you have never heard of do have an opportunity, because there's like no barrier to entry, not even a low barrier to entry. And there is also an opportunity for academics and others to join in. And what we need is facts, is data. And that's why I interview as many book authors, historians. Adam is here someplace, Adam Hochschild, who I've interviewed twice on his fabulous book, America at Midnight, because you have an opportunity to not only boost these people, but then to share the audience and hopefully grow the audience. And if we can do that, it's not a substitute for mainstream platforms, but first of all, it's an addition to, and there's some faint hope that we have that if we are seen as competitors, they will get better. They will have more investigative reporting, less polling, less hot takes on less ridiculous waste of space. My husband and I have an expression for it, the who gets the middle, armrest on the plane columns, the absolute waste of precious territory that you see in everything from the New York Times to, the local paper. So competition is a good thing. Competition, I think, will help the overall media environment. But we also have to try as hard as we can to make a common set of facts available to as many people as we can.
And does that, two questions coming out of that. One from our online audience said, is it useful to stop subscribing to the Post, or does that just hurt the remaining journalists?
People ask me that a lot. I subscribe because I have to, and because I have to know what they're doing and what they're reporting. It's not going to make, frankly, any difference to Jeff Bezos, because he doesn't care if you subscribe or not.
How about to the reporters?
But the reporters, because he has screwed up the business so bad, directly after the 300,000 people left, he had to have a round of layoffs because, like it was their fault. And he talks about losing the trust of the viewers and the readers. I mean, it's kind of appalling. So I think it's a personal decision. I come down vaguely on the side of continuing to subscribe. But frankly, they have screwed up their own business models so badly. I don't know what's going to become of them. We all have grown up, by and large, in the era where the Washington Post was a national paper. Before Watergate, it was a backwater kind of rag that no one took seriously. And Watergate changed that. It put them on the map. It made them a national outlet. They may lose that. And frankly, when you lose hundreds of thousands of subscribers at a time, you're losing relevance.
What is your media diet?
Oh, gosh. Well, first of all, it takes like 20 hours a day. So if I'm not sleeping or eating or reading a book, I am searching out news. It takes a lot of effort. So I do read the New York Times. I do read the Washington Post. The news coverage on the Wall Street Journal is often very good. Their opinion section is insane, except for now they finally discovered that Trump is bad for business. So this was a great secret that no one knew because he never talked about tariffs during the campaign, right? So, but be that as it may, you don't have to read all of every paper or every outlet. I think The Atlantic has done a marvelous job. They hired some of the Washington Post reporters, actually, so they have even better reportage, and I like them a lot. There are other Substacks that I think are terrific. The people at The Bulwark, Heather Cox Richardson, who does a daily analysis, and you kind of have to search. We never subscribed to The Economist. We subscribe to The Economist now because, again, you don't agree with everything, but they cover parts of the world the American press has given up on. They cover Africa, they cover Asia. And when other newspapers are closing down bureaus, you want to have a sense of what's going on in the world. So you have to kind of search for something that's going to fill your niche, and it should be a good mix of commentary, analysis, and fact. And sometimes it's just one person. You don't have to like the entire outlet. And judging from the people who turned in their subscription after I left the Washington Post, it seems that some people just read me at the Washington Post. But you don't have to read everybody, and you have to follow the people that you like. That's the great thing about Substack. It's like pick and choose. It's mix and match. You can get Paul Krugman. You can get
It's like YouTube TV versus the cable package.
Right. Exactly.
I also wanted to channel a question from maybe some of the students in the room, because I know this is what I'd be thinking right now. I'd be, holy shit, I'm graduating in May. I have all this student debt. Can I still make a career in journalism?
Yes.
And how do I do that?
Yes. First of all, you have to think of journalism as broader than Woodward and Bernstein political journalism. Journalism is everything that we need to know about everything. We need health reporters. We need science reporters. We need business reporters. We need sports reporters. We need all aspects of society that are out there. So if you have other interests, develop a specialty. Know something. You have to know something to have something to say. And it is far better if you come in as the only person who really understands, as it was 20 or 30 years ago, like the new iPhone and technology. Now there are fleets of technology reporters. So find something you're interested in, get to know it, and read and write until it's coming out your ears.
We have a reporter at the Chronicle who is a young reporter, I think just out of school, Megan Muntz, who came in, and she has become the leading reporter in the state on the insurance crisis here.
Exactly.
And she and thank God, because I was like,
Right.
I'm going to her. It's like,
And
she's probably never bought insurance.
It absolutely.
And she's explaining it to us all.
Yes, it comes out, and you can develop it by happenstance because you're the person who was available that day. You can develop it because you've had some background of yourself, but absolutely.
And not on its surface, not a sexy beat, but
Right.
super sexy right now.
And boy, is this important not only here, but in places like Florida. So yes, you have to have some knowledge. And then I think you have to be willing to go anywhere, work anywhere, and just begin the process. You're not going to be, first of all, it may not exist by the time you get out of school, but you're not going to be at the Washington Post, your first job out of journalism school. Go someplace where you can write every day. And if you absolutely cannot find a job in journalism, take another job, but write anyway. That's what Substack affords you. That's what online media affords you. And if you're good, people will notice you. People will find you. And that can also be video. We've talked mostly about print, the written word, because that's how I grew up, but we're talking videos, we're talking social media, we're talking TikTok, we're talking all kinds of media. You have to be willing to do it all. And you have to be willing to go anywhere, get any job where you can begin writing, check your ego, and eventually you will develop a reputation if you're good. And the other thing is you have to love what you are doing. I love what I am doing. Even in this miserable era where every day is another insult to one's conscience and intelligence.
My friends ask me, like, how are you doing? Like,
Yes, right. I love what I do.
It's great for intellectual challenge. Shitty as
I
an American.
love interviewing people. I love learning about things. I love constructing a great sentence. I love constructing a great paragraph. I love rewriting. I love now that I'm hiring people, giving people assignments and thinking up interesting new stories. I love the search for new talent. I spend hours during the week looking for young, diverse voices out there because I want to bring them into the fold and elevate them. I love every aspect of it. And if you don't, go do something else because it is hard. A huge number of your hours are going to be spent doing this if you're going to be good at it. And every once in a while, I come across a writer who says, oh, the writing is so hard for me. Why did you pick this profession, which is nothing but writing? You have to love it, and it has to kind of flow through you. And people also ask, how do you get to be a great journalist? You read. You read and read and read. You don't know what good writing is unless you've read good writing. And that's fiction, nonfiction, that's periodicals, that's books, anything and everything. And it's also going to keep your mind curious and active. And you may stumble across the insurance crisis, in which case that's your ticket to, journalistic fame. There is no journalistic
Any other
fame.
audience questions?
Now, you've been talking about the media, and, a lot of us are into newspapers, and all the newspapers locally are not doing well. And the ones that...
Chronicle is making money.
I'm glad to hear that.
And winning awards. So.
But, you look at the major newspapers that have had troubles financially. Washington Post, LA Times, they're all bought by very rich people. In my view, they bought them as toys.
Yeah.
How do you reverse the except for things like the New York Times that seems to have money all over the place?
Yeah, right.
How do you reverse that?
It is the $64 billion or $1 million question. And the answer is you have to begin reversing the pattern. And what's the pattern? The pattern is de-emphasizing investigative reporting, de-emphasizing fact-finding, de-emphasizing deep dives. The assumption is that the audience has no attention span, is not going to read something that involves sort of complex ideas, that they'd rather read about the politics of the issue than the issue. And I think that is just wrong. And if you feed people junk food, they're going to want more junk food. And if you feed them something more nutritious, that will work too. I think we may be moving to an era where, with a few exceptions, newspapers don't provide everything. There are a lot of papers that don't cover sports anymore. There are a lot of papers that don't do business news. And they have to marshal their resources. And that means if you're a sports fan or you're incredibly interested in business, you may have to go a couple places. But they have to figure out what they do better, and then they have to do it. And it costs money, and it costs an investment. And they can't treat it like a bauble and a plaything that is a lost leader for some other business. We made the grave error, and I was one of them, in thinking, oh, this is great when Comcast buys NBC. This is great when Disney. They'll be so big, no one will ever intimidate them. They'll be without, pressure points. It's the exact opposite. So maybe family-owned newspapers, and I really do believe we have to revive local reporting. That's where the granular stuff comes from. That's where I go looking for the real-life effects of cancellation of USAID. That's where I go looking for the data that makes these issues real. So it is the challenge, but it also means we need readers. And it also means that you and your kids have to develop the habit of reading good quality journalism.
Thank you.
I'm afraid it's time to bring this splendid session to a close. Let me thank, for starters, thank the San Francisco Chronicle for partnering with us to create this event. I want to thank the Graduate School of Journalism and my colleagues, the administrative staff who pulled this thing off without a glitch and made sure we were all fed and watered. Let me thank you all and our Zoom audience for being here tonight. And above all, let me thank our guests, our special guests, Joe Garofoli and Jennifer Rubin for a terrific session. So thank you all.
Thank you so much.